right, so it is 1 o'clock, so we'll get started. Thank you everybody for logging on today. My name is Maggie Norton, and let me get my video started here. Is it? No, it is. 1 second. There we go. Okay. So my name is Maggie Norton. I'm the Farmer Outreach Coordinator at Practical Farmers of Iowa. And like many organizations, you know, we've transitioned all of our in-person content over the past several months into online virtual events. So today I'm going to talk about just some considerations that you might want to, you know, think through when you're deciding what you want to do for an online event. Yesterday, I spent an hour with folks talking about how we have done our virtual field days using Zoom and linking up to Facebook to go live. It was really dense and there was a lot of material packed into it. So if you're interested in like technically like how we make that happen for our virtual field days, that presentation is going to get into the nuts and bolts of it. This one is taking us like a step back and assuming that there aren't as many resources on hand for an individual farmer or rancher, whereas PFI has the staff capacity to really put more resources towards one particular event. So we're gonna, you know, be together for the next hour. I encourage you to go ahead and ask your questions as they pop up throughout the presentation, but there will also be some time at the end to answer any additional questions you might have. Marie Flanagan is also one of the panelists today, and she's going to be watching the, thanks Marie, she's going to be watching the participant list and the chat box for me and helping out. So we're using Zoom webinar today. If you're not familiar with the platform already, you can engage through the chat box or through raising your hand. So if you open the chat box and if you haven't already introduced yourself and let us know where you're tuning in from, do that now. Just make sure that where it says to all panelists, switch that to say all panelists and attendees so that everybody, myself, Marie, and then everybody that's joining us as a participant can see your questions and comments. If you'd like to ask a question through audio, I encourage you to go ahead and raise your hand, and then Marie will let me know when somebody's raised their hand and we can unmute you. You'll see some sort of dialogue box like this that pops up prompting you to unmute, and then you can share your question or comment. And like I said, anytime throughout the next hour, go ahead and ask your questions. So the agenda for today is kind of, you know, like based on your goals. So what content you want to share, your resource considerations, and then what type of interaction you want to have on your audience. How will that determine what platform you choose to do a virtual event in? Then we'll talk about best practices. So what are some best practices before the event? Building an agenda, doing a tech test, some audio and video equipment considerations, and then during your event, what are some of the tasks that you should keep in mind, and then ending your event. And then at the end, I'll talk about what resources are going to be available for you, and we'll do any last questions you have. So this presentation is being recorded, and I will make the recording and the slides available, and I'll give those details when we get to the resources section. And I see somebody said the PowerPoint is currently showing. Marie, do you know the PowerPoint is currently showing in the presentation mode so we can see the next slide?
Yes, I was just going to tell you that. So are you in presenter mode?
I am, but I started doing, hold on a second. I started presenter mode after the fact, so that's probably why.
There we go.
There. Thank you for letting me know. One of my staff members, no one told her once in a presentation. She went through the entire thing in that presenter mode. All right, great. Now we're back on track. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to talk about are the goals. You know, what is the content, resource considerations, your interaction preference, and how does that determine your platform? So your content is the story that you want to share. So determine and figure out what story it is that you're trying to share with your audience, and what are those 3 main points that you want to get across. And then what format of your content is needed to get those points across. Can you just do audio to get that, that story across in the way that you're hoping to? Are you going to require video, or maybe photos would work? And it all depends on like what you have on hand. If you're talking about the progression of maybe your cover crops over the season, if you've got video throughout, you know, video clips or photos that you've been taking since the beginning of the year, that's an opportunity to share, you know, some archived materials that you've been saving up. And then beyond what format you want to share your information in, and I should say the format, you could do a PowerPoint presentation as well that includes all of this. Where do you want to share from? So do you want to be sitting behind your computer like I am today, and I've got all my prepared content ready to go and I can talk to you live, but you know, the videos or the photos, which I don't have to share, but if I did, they're all at my fingertips and ready to go? Or do you want to be out in the field where maybe you can respond to the questions that are coming in about certain equipment setups, or taking a closer look at like, you know, some crop that you're growing, and some weed management stuff. So what format do you want to share content in, and then where do you want to share it from? Do you want to be in the field, or do you want to just be sitting in your house? And it really kind of depends on what your resources are, right? So how connected, like what's your connection limitations, and then what kind of technical assistance do you have on hand? So connectivity for, I think, pretty much all of us is really a challenge. And if you want to share videos, or if you want to go live from your field, you really have to consider, is your internet capability in your house, your Wi-Fi, going to be enough to support streaming a video? Or if you're using cell phone, you know, coverage from a cell tower, is that going to be enough to get video across? So you can test that. You just need to get online. I've used speedtest.net. But if you just Google internet speed test, a whole bunch of options will pop up, and usually it's really easy. You just hit a go button or a start button, and you'll have some sort of progress bar show, and it'll spit out a couple of numbers. In this case, there's the download speed that it tests first, and then the upload speed. And it's the upload speed that you really want to pay attention to. The upload speed affects how quickly your computer can send out that video, and then how well your audience is going to be able to see it. So you know, I would recommend to test your upload speed, but don't do it just once. Do it multiple times. So do it different times of the day, on different days. If you know when you would like to be sharing or doing your presentation, specifically target that period of the day, because it might be during peak internet use, and it might be more favorable to move it to the morning or some other time in the afternoon when there's less traffic. I was curious, and so my partner and I are both working at home, and so I would test my speed when I knew he was on a conference call to see what a difference that makes. So if you've got kids that are at home and they're going to be using the internet, test it and see if it's possible that both people can be, if there's going to be a conflict there or not, and then plan for that in advance. Depending on where you look online, they recommend a minimum between 3.6 and 10 megabytes per second. So I think that like 5 megabytes per second or higher is probably adequate, but you can also have like a friend or family member test that with you. If you've already tried doing something like FaceTiming with family members over, you know, these social distancing days, and it's been really difficult for them to see your video, that might be a good indication already that it's not going to work out as well as you had hoped. So if your internet connection is not up to par, do you have an alternative connection that you can rely on? So do you have a family member who lives in town with a high-speed internet connection that you could potentially go there and do your presentation from their home? Or does somebody with a better connection, would they be willing to do your PowerPoint presentation for you? So like you'd be at the computer talking and sharing, or maybe you'd be out in the field sharing, but they would be at the computer managing the PowerPoint and sharing the videos from their computer instead. And that depends on what platform you're using as well. So resource considerations, your friends and family, and then if you have partnering organizations, or you're a member of an organization that you can lean on more for support, figure out who they are and start considering how you might want to ask some of those favors. Is there a way that they could help you test your connection? If you're going to be doing some sort of in-field demonstration, live or pre-recorded, are you going to need their help to do that, and ask around to see if somebody would have the time to help out on that? It's also really beneficial to have a camera person. You don't have to, but it just makes things a little bit easier if you've got somebody there to help with that. If you do want to pre-record material and put together a tight little video series or some content with multiple clips strung together, and you need to use video or audio editing software, then you might need some help from somebody that has a little more experience with that. The other thing is advertising your event. So are you going to share this event on your Facebook page? And maybe if you're a member of an organization, you can send it out on their email distribution list, or think about how you're going to advertise your content that you've spent the time putting together. And then if you do have to make a Zoom account or a WebEx account in order to put together these events, if somebody that has more experience with those, they can help you set that account up and prepare you for giving you demos, or getting you set up so you know exactly what to expect and how to use all the different features that are available. So we've talked about your resources and your content, but also it's important to consider what type of interaction you want to have. Is this meant to be an information sharing activity where you've provided a lot of information and you just want to broadcast it out to your audience with maybe some, like today, I'll take questions, but for the most part, it's a one-way conversation where I'm sharing my knowledge and expertise with you, and you might have clarifying questions, but it's really one direction. Or do you want it to be more conversational and idea generating, where you've put together an outline with some points that you want to cover, but you really are trying to brainstorm with folks and get more feedback from them and have everybody participating more equally. And then once you get an idea of what type of interaction you want to have, and that interaction also is like, do you want to be able to talk to them? Do you want to be able to see them? Do you want to be able to just text and do emails or discussions? Once you figure that out, also frequency, group size, and whether you want the interaction to be real time or not. So frequency, do you want to do smaller, more frequent events? Like maybe you'll have a YouTube series where you've put together 3 minutes of content to talk about this one particular crop or this one particular piece of equipment, and then you follow up a couple of weeks later with another short video on another piece of information, and then continue on that way. Every so many weeks you're uploading a consistent amount of content to share? Or do you want to spend a lot more time on one or just a couple of larger events? And that might dictate what group size you want. So if it's just a couple of really large events, then you're probably looking for a larger group to participate in those few events. Whereas if it's a more frequent, reoccurring event, then it might be better to have a smaller group that you get to know and that you build a rapport with to continue those conversations. And then real time, you have the option of doing a synchronous event or an asynchronous event. So a synchronous event means that everybody, like today, we're all here together and I can take your questions and give you an immediate response, whereas asynchronous would be something where I pre-recorded all of this, put it online, and then you looked at it later and followed up by email, and I would, respond that way. So do you want something that has an immediate back and forth with your audience, or do you want something that might span over a longer duration of time where everybody is just contributing when it's more convenient for them? So I've broken down, I've got 2 tables I'm going to share next, and there's a lot of information on them, and it's a lot to look at, but I want you to be able to come back to these slides later, and I've broken each of the tables up by whether they are synchronous interactions or asynchronous interactions. So this first table is all asynchronous interactions. These are all platforms that are available with a free account. I didn't want to include platforms on here that in settings that you need an account or like there's a paywall for. So everything you see on this table, this is what you can access with a free account. I got most of this information from videoconferencing.guide, and that's actually the URL is videoconferencing.guide. It's a really good website, and they list, there's got to be like 30 different options on there, a bunch of applications I've never even heard of. So if these don't really suit you or you're curious for some other options and also more detail on each of these, I would highly recommend going to that videoconferencing.guide website. These are the platforms I thought people would be more familiar with and they would be a little more accessible. Of course, everybody at this point in time is really familiar with Zoom. Zoom meeting is what I've got listed here because in order to do a webinar like today, there is a paywall. WebEx is also another common platform very similar to Zoom. Then we've got Skype, Facebook Messenger, and then Facebook Live, Google Hangouts, and I added conference call on here as, it's not really the same online experience, but especially if you've got really difficult challenges with the internet, conference calls are kind of the fallback, low tech. There's no visual, but it's an option. So then these other columns I've got here are, what type of interaction is your attendee able to have with you? Are they able to engage with you over video, audio through phone call, or through text like the chat box today? Screen sharing is really important to consider because if you've got a PowerPoint, if you've got photos, videos that you want to share, you're going to be able, you have to have that screen sharing capability in order to do that. Unless you were just going to use the, your camera on your phone as the video sharing device. If it's pre-recorded, then you need to have the screen sharing capabilities. So most of these allow for screen sharing. The only ones that don't are Facebook Messenger, Facebook Live, and conference call, obviously. And then depending on what kind of group size you want to have or what you're expecting your turnout to be, also pay attention to what the maximum attendee capacity is. And I mean, these are all pretty large for the free accounts, so you shouldn't run into any problems. Time limit is another one that can sneak up on you. Well, only for Zoom. So all the others, they've got multiple hours before they'll boot you off. So you don't have to worry about a time limit really, except Zoom meetings only allow you to be on for 40 minutes, which I guess if you've got a hard deadline and you want to be, move on after 40 minutes, then that's one way to make sure you don't go over time, but you don't want to be surprised with that limit. So know that if you do Zoom meetings, there is 40-minute cap on those interactions. And then the join type is how people can access your event. So Zoom meeting and WebEx have the broadest selection because you can use your some sort of like program on your desktop. You can access it using your browser. You can use an app on a mobile phone, or you can call in using your phone. Then as you move down the list, it just kind of dwindles in options. So Skype, you can use desktop, mobile, or browser, but you can't call into it. And then, you know, as you see there, it becomes more limited. And then the account requirements are important too, right? So you don't want people to be limited in their ability to join your event if they don't have an account with that platform. And the only two that become a problem are Facebook Messenger and Google Hangouts. You have to have a Facebook or a Google account in order to join. What do we got, Marie? You got a question?
Yeah, John Smith wants to know what platform you would recommend for a 5-hour program.
Whoa. What is your 5-hour program? I would say maybe WebEx would be your best option. I mean, I'm most familiar with Zoom. If you have, I should have iterated when we were talking about resources, and I think maybe I do later, but if you've got funds to upgrade some of these so that you can do a long event and not worry about those limitations, play around, you know, look into those options. I would say though that I hope you're not planning on folks being around for 5 hours straight. That's really challenging. It's one thing to be at an in-person event for over an hour, but to be online, especially if you're anybody that has had to do a lot of online meetings lately, it's really challenging to stay engaged for that long. So potentially even breaking that 5-hour program up into multiple days so that you have like an hour and a half on a couple different days that covers that same amount of content. I would play around with breaking it up somehow. And maybe if you break it up, you wouldn't be limited by the time limits that are here. All right. So let's move on to asynchronous accounts or options. So some of the platforms here are, you know, Facebook again, but instead of using Facebook Live, maybe just doing a pre-recorded video and sharing it on Facebook. Same thing with YouTube, pre-recording something and throwing it up on YouTube and then sharing that link with folks. You could also put together a podcast if you wanted to do all audio. You could do a blog where a lot of it is text and then you embed some photos and videos or links to some additional, like a YouTube video if you've already got some of that content made and available to share. And then online discussion, there might be a forum out there or an email discussion list that you could put together and start sharing on a regular basis over some sort of online back and forth. But the blog, the podcast, and the online discussion, I mean, each of those is like there's a whole other set of questions and how-tos to go into, and I don't have as much experience with those, but if it's something that you'd like to do, there's definitely resources out there to look into it. So again, I tried to include some, you know, information on like the content format, capacity, time limit, access, and then account requirements. They're really, you know, it's pretty flexible and accessible. The only thing that I do want to mention about Facebook is if you're going to be sharing photos or if content of any sort, if you're going to be sharing it through a personal Facebook page, and that includes live events too, just make sure that your privacy settings allow for people to join. So if you've got a Facebook account that's locked down pretty tight and you're trying to share some sort of outreach, a lot of people, you know, unless they're your friend, they're not going to be able to see it. So just keep that in the back of your mind when you're putting this content online. And then rely on your tech savvy contacts. So Dave, get that, you know, pull your son out and have him, your 11-year-old son, show you the ropes on how to do this stuff. All right, now best practices. So before and during. Before is, you know, build an agenda, tech test, and AV equipment. So building an agenda is a great first step into really establishing what your event is going to look like. So you've got ideas, you've got a sense of what material you want to share, but now take the time to sit down and determine what are the key points of your story that you're trying to get across. How are you going to convey those points? So do you need to be at a specific location on the farm to get a point across? Do you need some props? Are your prepared videos and photos adequate enough? How much time are you going to need, and how are you going to stay on track? So this gets back to John's question about the 5 hours. You know, the shorter the period of time is, the more attention you can, like, the better attention you can keep of your audience. So if you're gonna do only a 15-minute or a 30-minute event, how much can you actually pack into that 15 minutes or 30 minutes? It's really ambitious and easy to like sit down and talk about all these different pieces of equipment you might want to show, and you might want to talk about this practice and how it worked last year and how it worked this year. But it all adds up really quickly, especially if you want to allow time for back and forth with questions. So really hone in on what are those key points and what can I accomplish within whatever your determined time limit is. And then how do you stay on track? So I recommend keeping a printout of your agenda while you're doing the event to make sure you're hitting all your points. Also, at this point in time, recognize whether or not you are going to need assistance from somebody. If you want to do a demo, then is somebody going to be available to run a piece of equipment during that period of time? What are your AV equipment requirements? You know, what do you have as far as audio, video equipment on hand already? Do you have a Bluetooth earpiece that you can use? Do you have a tripod that's available? Do you know people that have some of this equipment that you might be able to borrow? This is what you need to figure out during your agenda building phase. And then the more moving pieces you have, the tighter you want your agenda to be. And the goal is to have a really solid agenda so that when you do your tech test, you're prepared and you can do a dry run of your agenda to check that, yes, you have the equipment you need, you know how to use it, you stay in your time frame. So the tech test is your opportunity to confirm that you can get everything done you want to get done. If you have multiple people that are helping out on the event, this is your opportunity to clarify the roles and expectations. If you're using WebEx or something that you've never used before, make sure that you're comfortable with it, that it's working the way you expect it to work. If you've got equipment, so if you're going to be using a Bluetooth earpiece for the first time, make sure you know how to use it. If it gets disconnected, you know how to get back on. And then go through some of those demonstrations too, that it's showing up the way you wanted to and your points coming across. Practice, you know, and also with practice using the software, if you are planning on sharing from your computer, practice screen sharing and practice moving between your windows so that you're comfortable with that ahead of time. And hopefully throughout this process, you can identify whatever lingering issues there are and resolve them ahead of time. You can do more than one tech test as well, right? And this is all in an effort to boost your confidence so that you're just comfortable with this process. And by the time you get to the real event, you're relaxed and ready to just go and have fun and take questions and do what needs to be done. We got a question?
There are a couple questions in the chat about equipment. Can you see them?
Yep. So I have a slide and two slides. Well, in the next two slides, I'm going to talk more about equipment. So hopefully I will answer some of those questions. I see that somebody asked about suggestions on obtaining AV equipment, and then suggestions on audio equipment for presentations and Facebook Live videos. So let's just move on right now and take care of those. So these are some best practices when using your audio and video equipment. You know, simple things like making sure that you clean the lenses off before you start filming is key, right? You don't want a blurry video for your audience. Holding the phone, make sure you hold your phone landscape or horizontal rather than the portrait mode, because it gives just a nice wide picture and it fits most of your audience's screen better. Use the front-facing camera, the selfie camera, when you're walking from place to place. If you're trying to film where you're walking to and it's forward facing, it gives your audience kind of a seasick feeling. It usually can't keep up with the frames changing so quickly. So by turning it around so it's the selfie mode, the camera can really focus on your face and it's a better experience for your audience. Whenever possible, use a tripod, especially if you're streaming live. Because the connection might not be the best anyway, and it might not be able to keep up with the frames changing so much. And even if you have a camera person who's holding the camera steady, I promise you it's not as steady as you think it is. You know, we've had a couple of people do the virtual field days where somebody is their stand-in camera person, and even though they are holding it steady, but there's just that slight movement that never quite stops, and it means that there's never a crisp picture. So if you have a tripod, use it, or get one if you can. And then use a microphone. So today I'm at home. I don't have any background noise going on. My cats are leaving me alone, so I don't have to worry about that background noise. I have a good internal microphone on my computer, so I'm not worried about using a headset. But if you don't have a good internal computer microphone and that's something you want to test ahead of time, use a pair of earbuds that has the built-in mic and just, you know, use that during the event. You can even use those connected to your phone if you're going to be out in the field. I would suggest, highly recommend, that if you are going to be outside, use a Bluetooth earpiece. They're designed to block out background noise anyway, and it really helps with the wind. And we've even had a number of virtual field days where large equipment is running in the background, and our farmer who's out in the field with that equipment, they can't hear the staff member talking to them while it's running, but we, as the audience, you can't even hear the equipment in the background. So those Bluetooth headpieces like really cut out a lot of that background noise, and it's a lot nicer on the ears for your audience. So the last item here is just like little things like don't shoot into the sun and keep strong winds at your back, even if you do have a Bluetooth headpiece in. Trying to keep a majority of the wind away from the microphone is good, and record in a quiet place if you're going to do pre-recording. So these are what we're sharing with our farmers this year. We went ahead and purchased a couple sets of each of these. And then for farmers that are doing a virtual field day, we send them a kit based on whether they're going to need to do pre-recorded video or if they're just going to do all live. And the equipment that we're setting out are either the Plantronics headset, and there's two different types of the headset that we purchased and are sending out to farmers to use. We also have the Hey Mic, and we are reimbursing farmers for an app called Film Mic Pro. And this is what we're sending to people that are doing pre-recorded video. So this mic actually will fit, it's got a magnet on it, so it just clips onto your shirt, and then you can pair it with your phone, and using that Film Mic Pro app, you end up being able to record video footage with the audio from that mic, and it's just a much higher quality audio video combination than what you would get talking into your phone through speakerphone, or, I mean, your next best bet would be using the Bluetooth or like connecting your earbuds up to it. So Paula just asked, are you sending those kits to SARE grantees? So these kits are what Practical Farmers of Iowa are sending to our members who are doing a virtual field day this year. So I'm not sure what type of resource access SARE grantees have for getting equipment like this. I asked after yesterday's presentation, I asked our digital media coordinator who purchased all of this, how much a kit usually costs. And a kit is either, it's one of these mics and then both of the tripods, and they cost around between $170 and $200, depending on which combination he was able to get, because I don't think that in all cases, he got the same exact tripod, for instance. But then these two tripods are useful in different ways. So the Joby tripod has these flexible legs that allow you to wrap around equipment if you're in a location where you want to be able to focus the camera in an awkward angle, perhaps. Whereas the tall tripod is really useful if you need clearance off the ground so that you can be standing in your field talking to the camera, or maybe like at a workbench or something that's a little higher up. So, all right, I see we've got a couple more questions. Great. So Rob Meyer said, and he said he's SARE grant administrator said, I would say you can generally purchase equipment like this on your SARE grant, assuming you have funds available. You have 10% budget flexibility on your grant. So that's really useful to know. Thank you, Rob. So yeah, this is what we're sharing. And I mean, you know, there's lots of options out there. So just using this as a basis of where to start, you can Google some other options and see what fits your budget. All right, so now we've done the best practices before. We'll do some best practices during, and that's tasks and ending the event. So tasks, continue to follow the best practices for, you know, the equipment tips that we just went over, but also keep your agenda with you so that you have something to refer to if you get sidetracked and need a little bit of guidance, and you can keep on time. Monitor your audio and video quality. Make sure that your connection is still strong. You don't want to lose connection and just be walking around talking to yourself out in the field and realize, you know, a minute later that no one's on the line. For synchronous events, give yourself a buffer of time before your live event starts, where you and anybody else that's involved can all log on or call in. Make sure that everybody gets online as needed, and if there's any last minute questions to resolve, you can do that before you go live. And then I have some tips on the next slide about being a better facilitator. For asynchronous events, make sure that, you know, you're following up on the discussion that's being posted, and maybe come up with some prompts or polls to get the conversation started at the get-go. And lastly, just, you know, all of this prep work is meant to boost your confidence so you feel more comfortable, and then on the day of, you really can relax and share all the information that you have right at your fingertips, at your brain tips. You're ready to give it out, you know, provide that for your audience. And you don't have to be thinking about all these little things in the background. You're just more relaxed and ready to share. So to be a better facilitator, and if you have somebody with you, you know, you might be able to give some of these tasks to a partner or, you know, a neighbor, whoever's helping. But make sure you welcome your attendees, introduce yourself, and then anybody that's helping. Set the expectations at the beginning. So outline how long you'll be together, and if there's some directions for the platform to, you know, use certain features, make sure you make it clear how to do that. And then talk about what your expectations are for questions and answering. Moderate in the discussion and questions as needed, and that's always a good thing to pawn off to somebody else if you don't want to be watching the comment section and following your agenda. And then if you've got a lot of people that are trying to, you know, answer at the same time or talk at the same time, get in the habit of calling on somebody and letting the next person in line know that they're up next. That way they can prepare their answer and they'll be ready to unmute and engage. And then for those that aren't speaking, make sure that everybody stays muted by default, because that'll, you know, eliminate a lot of the background noise that I think everybody has unfortunately had to experience at one point or another over the past couple of months. And then periodically check to like pause and ask if your call-in participants have any questions. Sometimes if you've got people that you're engaging with in a Zoom meeting or something visually, you'll forget that you've got people that are on the phone, and it's good to just stop and ask if they have any questions. And then tie up some loose ends. So at the very end of your presentation, you know, consider these points. Are there any evaluations that you need to send out, and how are you going to do that? Do you have contact information? And are people, you know, are you willing to answer follow-up questions afterwards? And how are you going to share that information with them? Are you going to share the slides and the resources, and how are you going to share those? If the event was live, is there going to be a recording that they can view later? And if you do have a series of events, before you log off completely, make sure you let everybody know to tune in again for your next event. And then thank all your other speakers and attendees, and you can go ahead and end. I'm sorry, you probably hear my dehumidifier beeping. So the resources for today, now that we're coming to an end to this presentation, today's slides are going to be available to you. In a couple of days, I'll have this recording posted as well. And then I also have a, I'll share that other screen now. I set up, and this link will direct you. And Marie, if you could send that link out to everybody again, that would be really helpful. But I set up, the link will direct you to a website. So hopefully you are seeing this Google folder. So not a website, a Google folder. And I've got yesterday's PowerPoint slides, today's PowerPoint slides, a couple of other resources. In this examples doc, I tried to go through and find a selection of, you know, a couple of PFI videos as an example of what some of our farmers have done for their field days. And then I found a couple of other institutional. Hey Marie, I see you just popped on. Can everybody see my page all right?
Yeah, I just wasn't able to get that whole URL before you changed.
Oh, okay. Sure. Actually, here, I saved it in this PowerPoint. But this examples page, you know, there's a lot of content out there, and I just wanted to get some examples on here for people to start off with as like getting some inspiration. But also I changed the settings for this document so that anybody with a link can edit it. So if you have a suggestion of how to do some sort of on-farm virtual outreach, go ahead and add that here to share with everybody. And then that's actually it. I didn't have anything else. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to take questions the next 15 minutes or so that we're here together. So Joan made a point a couple minutes ago about checking with Extension or local colleges, universities to see if they have any equipment that's available. That's a good idea. I wonder too if public libraries would probably have some equipment available. Right, so today we went over, you know, depending on what your goals are, as far as what content you want to share, what your resource considerations are, what type of interaction you want to have with your audience, how that all plays into what platform you're going to use to be the basis of your outreach event or your online event. And then best practices, I just covered some tasks and practices that will hopefully give you a better outcome. Any ideas on how to increase promotions for live events in Facebook? I know that if you have, at least if you have an actual page on, I don't know if it's the same for a personal Facebook page, but if you have like a business page, you can boost events and you can actually pay to like have those events marketed on Facebook more. I don't know how much that costs. That'd be a digital media coordinator question. But I would, you know, use your network. So if you're a member of different organizations, ask if they'll share that with their membership, and really just pass that information along through as many channels as you can. Thankfully, what's nice about Facebook Live is that the algorithms that are happening in the background if people meet up with the profile of who they think would be in the audience, it'll just pop it to their Facebook feed automatically. It's just that they have to be on Facebook in order to see that. So Rob asked, I was a little unclear about whether you were suggesting using Bluetooth earpiece with the magnetic microphone or if only the microphone is needed connected to your phone. So regardless of whether you're live streaming or if you're pre-recording, try and use a microphone of some sort rather than using speakerphone. The Bluetooth headset is really nice for being out in the field and having more mobility because you're not tied to the to your phone. The Hey Mic, which was the one that was paired with the app, I'm not sure what decision making occurred behind the scenes that this was. I think that this mic just paired really well with Film Mic Pro for doing really high quality pre-recorded content. But in general, if you just have a standard Bluetooth earpiece, I believe that's a really good question because there might be challenges syncing your Bluetooth mic up to be paired with video you're recording on your phone. And maybe that's why we had to go through this route with the app. So if you, I can follow up, and also within the Google folder that I just shared, there's a frequently asked questions document. And so the questions that I'm answering today, I'll also put into that document, and I can get a little more detail on that. So Cassidy asked, have you tried out the Facebook Live auto-generated closed captioning service? Just wondering how to keep things accessible for more folks. We've talked about it and we haven't played around with it. I know that it would also be useful, you know, we have non-English speaking folks that will show up to our conferences, and so it'd be nice to provide content online with this, you know, with that feature to allow them to watch. But we, you know, we talked about it and we haven't actually tried those features out yet. At what point will SARE know if AV equipment will be available to rent, borrow, and how will we be notified? I can't answer that, but
Looks like Beth answered that in the next.
okay. So Beth said, if you have questions about whether or not you can purchase equipment on your SARE grant or want to check in about SARE AV kits that we could share, contact your NCR SARE grant program administrator. So that's Joan Benjamin, Rob Myers, or Beth Nelson. And because they're unsure of demand, they'll just need a little bit of time to put together those kits. But they'll need a little more information from those who are interested, and then they can put together kits and make them available. All right, so then Jan Libby asked, the virtual field days are recorded and posted to YouTube, correct? Yeah, what's nice about especially with the Facebook Live virtual field days we're doing, is as soon as the live event finishes, that video just stays on Facebook and is accessible through our Facebook page. Then Jason, our digital media coordinator, is also pulling it off and making it available through YouTube as well. And then all of our Zoom events, because most of our events are Facebook Live, but a handful of them are only happening on Zoom. Those he's pulling, and I believe he'll be sharing them both on Facebook and definitely on our YouTube channel. All right, and then do you need an additional app for recording through Facebook Live, or do you record through Zoom slide or the Zoom side? So the only way you can link your Zoom account to Facebook Live is if you have the webinar package. You have to have a webinar in order to link those two together. Yesterday's presentation goes through that more in depth, Otherwise, if you just have Facebook on your phone, you would pull up the Facebook app and then, you know, hit go live, and you'd be able to provide that content through your phone. All right, so it's 1:50. Do we have any other questions? Are there any slides that I can go back and, you know, if you'd like to take a look and ask a question about a specific slide, I can do that. All right, so Dave asked, so does a field day have to be live? In other words, I'm leaning towards a video presentation with documentation embedded within research and so on. I would narrate over it to summarize the project and outcomes. I would then provide my email and other contact information to provide follow-up. Would that still qualify as a live field day? Yeah, you can definitely do that. I mean, if that makes the most sense to you, then for sure you can pre-record everything and share it after the fact with follow-up information. You could even put that video out for those to view it, and suggest that you set up like a conference call for a couple of days later or something, and you could have a conversation with other people about it. That's totally up to you. Well, do we have any other questions, or we can let everybody go? I know it's really nice out and I kind of want to just go back out on my deck. So if we don't have any more questions, then we'll wrap it up. And, you know, all this stuff will be available for you to reference later. So draw on it as needed. And thank you everybody for tuning in. It was good to share, and it's good to, I didn't get to see your faces, but I see some familiar names, and it's nice knowing that you're out there. So take care, everybody. Keep your eyes out in email for an email from me with the resource link. And yeah, if you have questions, my contact information is available. All right. Bye, everyone. Thank you, Marie, for helping.